I thought I knew everything there was to know about the 1992 Hooters 500. 10 years ago, I wrote a book about that iconic event, NASCAR's greatest race, the 1992 Hooters 500, the Kid, the King, and the Underbird. The Kid, it was the first Winston Cup start of Jeff Gordon's career. The King, of course, Richard Petty. It was the last Winston Cup race of Richard's career. The Underbird, Alan Kulwicki, who came out on top of a season-long dogfight for the Winston Cup championship that came down to a showdown between Kulwicki, Bill Elliott, and Davey Allison in the season finale. Enric Mas sat on the pole that day. Heaven help me if I leave out that particular piece of information. At approximately 50,000 words, I had captured pretty much everything there was to capture about that event. Or at least, that's what I thought. But then I went and talked to Tim Brewer again, this time for the Scene Vault podcast. Turns out, old Brewer had been holding out on me, and everybody else for that matter, for all those years. To my knowledge, this is the first time this part of Brewer's story has been shared publicly. And had his scheme worked out, it would have rewritten NASCAR history, not to mention my book. A special thanks this week to North Wilkesboro Speedway. The old girl is back this weekend with its first NASCAR Cup points race in 30 years, the Window World 450. Weekend ticket and Ultimate Fan Pass packages are available now at northwilkesborospeedway.com.
Waltrip has been very strong here. Allison's been fast this year on the short tracks.
Bill Elliott started the 1992 season like he'd been shot out of a cannon. He qualified second for the Daytona 500, bested only by his new Junior Johnson and Associates teammate, Sterling Marlin. Both had Brewer tricks on their cars during time trials, and if he'd been caught, Brewer swears that it would have landed him in NASCAR's electric chair. And yeah, we've got that story too, in a video release here on YouTube that was posted a couple of weeks ago. Go check that one out. After getting caught up in a disappointing multi-car crash midway through the Daytona 500, Elliott then proceeded to win the next 4 races on the Winston Cup schedule: Rockingham, Richmond, Atlanta, and Darlington. The 1988 Winston Cup champion solidified his spot atop the standings in early August and stayed there for nearly 3 months until a soured engine at Phoenix dropped him to third behind new miracle leader Davey Allison and underdog Alan Kulwicki going into the season finale Hooters 500 at Atlanta. Allison was right there where he needed to be to win the championship once the race got underway, but got taken out in a crash with Ernie Irvan. And then there were 2, Elliott and Kulwicki, the crown hanging in the balance and destined to come down to a 5-point bonus for leading the most laps. And that bonus was going to come down to the timing of the final pit stop. Here's where things got interesting.
There was a code word that went out, and he was supposed to have done something at Atlanta, and the code word went out, but he came down pit road. I didn't say pit. I gave him a code word, and he was supposed to do something in the car, and that would have been a lot of difference. But we'd have put Alan Kulwicki a lap down.
That was way too juicy a tidbit to not at least try to coax more out of Brewer. I gave it a shot. Tim, you got to quit throwing me pitches and not expect me to take a swing at it.
Well,
what was the code word, and what was he supposed to do?
I didn't say pit, I said pull.
Okay.
And if he'd have pulled, it would have been something come out from under the battery box. And it was a piece of aluminum that had some orange paint on it. My cars were red. But if that would have happened, the piece of aluminum would have came out. The caution flag would have come out. Alan had already pitted. Caution flag comes out, he'd been a lap down.
So basically it was just a piece of debris that you were going to create your own caution.
There you have it.
I thought I knew everything there was to know about that race. I wrote a book about that race. I never heard that story.
You were wrong.
Then Brewer went into the specifics of the contraption that he'd rigged up under Elliott's car.
There was a piece of safety wire that was double strand that had a ring on it right here in the roll bar padding. And it ran back down the roll bar padding, and there was 2 cotter pins that was spread this far, and all you had to do was pull that cable. Those 2 cotter pins released that piece of aluminum. It blew out on the racetrack, and it's going to be the tower's going to say, "Put it out, Harold," and it's a caution flag.
And it was even a different color, so they couldn't trace it back to you guys.
It was a piece of aluminum, had a little bit of orange paint on it. My car was red.
Was it Kulwicki orange?
May have been. But there was a couple of guys in the shop. Wayne Dalton, he's passed now. He was my shop foreman for 15 years. Him and Doug Beatty. Doug Beatty, he still works for Penske. You know, I told him, I said, "Here, this is what I want to do." And I went, "Brewer, if you get caught," I said, "I ain't going to get caught." But
For that thing?
yeah.
Wow.
It did, you know, if it would have got pulled.
Could it possibly have gotten under your tire?
No.
Okay.
No. You know, at the end of the day, if it would have got under the tire, it wouldn't have been no big deal. But you just want something flashing on the racetrack that the tower can see, and it's automatic. Okay, Kulwicki goes a lap down, Bill Elliott's leading the race.
Over and above Brewer's contraption, there's even more to the story. The way things actually did shake out, Bill Elliott won the 1992 Hooters 500, but the championship went to Alan Kulwicki by just 10 points due to the most laps led bonus. Look it up. It's right there in the record books and online databases. But here's the part that you probably don't know.
Me and Paul Andrews are still good friends, and we sat at Charlotte Motor Speedway, and we talked about 1992. He said, "Brewer, you know what's bad about that?" I said, "What's that?" He said, "We lost the nut on the air cleaner when we were going through inspection Sunday morning. We couldn't find it nowhere." So
At Atlanta?
I'm going to get to that. They went ahead and run the race. When they tore the motor down, guess where it was at? Stuck in a cylinder head, because it had fell down through the motor and got embedded in the combustion chamber. And when they started to rotate the motor, guess where it was at? It locked the motor up. But it had been in there bouncing around the whole race. But it got stuffed up in a cylinder head. And after the race, during inspection, they were turning the motor over. It locked the motor up.
Consider the implications. If Brewer's gadget had worked, or if Kulwicki's engine had failed, the 1992 Winston Cup Championship goes to Bill Elliott, making him, at the very least, a 2-time Winston Cup champion. If Elliott wins the 1992 championship, it's possible, if not likely, Brewer doesn't get fired during the offseason. If Brewer stays at Junior Johnson and Associates, could he and Elliott have continued stringing together the successes that they had in 1992? Either way, Bill Elliott is still inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. He was already Awesome Bill from Dawsonville, winner of the Winston Million and the 1988 Winston Cup Championship. But what of Kulwicki? If he does not win that title, he is more than likely not elected to the NASCAR Hall of Fame. There's a big difference between underdogs who do and don't quite overcome the odds. What do you think? What changes for Elliott if Brewer remains his crew chief in 1993 and beyond? What happens with Kulwicki if he fails to capture the 1992 title? Does Kulwicki somehow still make the NASCAR Hall of Fame? Let us know what you think in the comments section below.
Kulwicki is the Winston Cup champion for 1992 and is again taking a backwards lap around Atlanta Motor Speedway.